The Iron Fist Falls, the Galactic Empire, had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their massive warships cast shadows over 100 worlds, and their purple banners flew from every conquered planet. The Empire's strength came from the Draxen, race, tall, scaled beings with 4 arms and minds sharp as steel. They believed themselves the perfect species, born to rule all others. Emperor Vox sat on his crystal throne, overlooking the capital world of Prima. Through the massive windows of his palace, he could see the slave markets below. Thousands of beings from dozens of species worked in chains, some mining precious metals, others building monuments to Draxen glory. The Empire had crushed every rebellion, defeated every alliance that dared oppose them. But there was one species the Empire had never encountered: humans. Admiral Kane stood before the Emperor, his 4 arms folded behind his back. His yellow eyes gleamed with excitement as he delivered his report. "My lord, our scouts have found something interesting. A small blue world in the outer rim, populated by a primitive species called humans. They have barely reached their own moon. No faster than light travel, no energy weapons, no shields." Emperor Vox leaned forward. "Population? 8 billion, my lord. Perfect for slave labor. Their world is rich in water and rare minerals. We could strip mine it within a decade." The Emperor's scaled lips curled into a smile. "Send the 4th Fleet. Make it quick and clean. I want those humans in chains before the next moon cycle." Kane bowed low. "It shall be done, my lord." 3 days later, the 4th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Earth. 200 Draxen warships, each one larger than the biggest human city. Their hulls gleamed black against the stars, bristling with plasma cannons and energy shields. Fleet Commander Zane opened a channel to every communication device on Earth. His image appeared on televisions, radios crackled with his voice, and computer screens everywhere showed his face. "Primitive beings of this world, you are now subjects of the Galactic Empire. Surrender immediately and submit to processing. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your cities." The humans below stared at their screens in shock and terror. World leaders scrambled to respond, but they had nothing that could reach the ships above. The most powerful human weapons were like throwing stones at armored giants. President Miller addressed the world from an underground bunker. "My fellow humans, we face an enemy beyond our understanding, but we will not give up. We will not bow down. Whatever happens, remember this day. Remember what we stood for." Commander Zane watched the human cities through his ship's sensors. He saw their primitive aircraft taking off, small metal craft that moved slower than his fighters. He saw their ground forces gathering, soldiers with simple projectile weapons that could not even scratch his ship's hull. "Begin the harvest," he ordered. The Draxen ships descended like falling stars. Massive tractor beams lifted entire city blocks into the air. Civilians screamed as they were pulled up into the cargo holds of the alien vessels. The few human weapons that managed to fire simply bounced off the energy shields, like raindrops. In just 6 hours, the conquest was complete. Major cities lay in ruins, their populations taken. The Draxen ships began mining operations, tearing apart mountains and draining oceans. The few humans who escaped into remote areas could only watch in horror as their world was stripped bare. But unknown to the Draxen forces, some humans had been ready. Deep underground, in bunkers built during the Cold War, small groups of scientists and military personnel had been working on projects that no one else knew about. Secret experiments with quantum physics, artificial intelligence, and genetic enhancement. Dr. Roberts sealed the blast door of Underground Facility 7. Around him, 50 of Earth's brightest minds worked frantically at computer terminals. They had been preparing for this day, not knowing exactly what form the threat would take, but knowing it would come. "How long do we have?" asked Colonel Brooks, the facility's military commander. "The Draxon ships will finish mining operations." "In 2 years," Roberts replied, studying the data they had gathered. "Then they'll move on to the next world, leaving this system empty." "What about our people?" Roberts' jaw tightened. "Intelligence suggests they're being processed as slave labor, scattered across the Empire to work in mines and factories on dozens of worlds." Colonel Brooks slammed his fist on the table. "Then we get them back. How? We barely have spaceflight. They have an empire spanning half the galaxy." Brooks smiled grimly. "Doctor, you've been working on Project Silent Thunder for 10 years. The quantum research, the AI development, the genetic programs, it's all been building to this. They think. Humans are primitive. They think we're weak. They're about to learn they made a very big mistake." Dr. Roberts nodded slowly. "The real war was just beginning. The silent years, 2 years, passed like a nightmare for humanity. The Draxon Empire had stripped Earth bare, leaving behind a dead rock floating in space. The oceans were gone, the continents scarred with massive mining pits. Only a few underground facilities remained hidden, their inhabitants working in absolute secrecy. In Underground Facility 7, Dr. Roberts had aged 10 years in 24 months. His hair had turned gray, but his eyes burned with determination. Around him, the surviving humans had accomplished the impossible. "Report," Colonel Brooks commanded, standing before a massive holographic display. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her fingers dancing over a control panel. "Project Silent Thunder is ready for Phase 1. We've successfully created 12 AI cores, each one capable of learning and adapting at superhuman speed. They've been studying every piece of Draxon technology we captured from the wreckage." The hologram showed sleek, dark ships unlike anything humanity had ever built. They were small, barely large enough for a single person, but their design was revolutionary. "These are ghost ships," Dr. Roberts explained. "Quantum phase hulls that can slip between dimensions for short periods. To Draxon sensors, they'll be completely invisible. Each one is controlled by an AI that thinks 1,000 times faster than any biological mind." Colonel Brooks nodded approvingly. "And the pilots?" Dr. Sarah Chun, the genetics specialist, spoke up. "We've enhanced 12 volunteers through genetic modification, faster reflexes, stronger bones, improved oxygen processing. They can survive in conditions that would kill normal humans. We call them shadow pilots." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Draxon Empire continued its expansion. Emperor Vox had forgotten about the small blue world called Earth. To him, it was just another conquered planet, its people just another batch of slaves scattered across his mining worlds. But the human slaves had not been idle either. On the mining planet Karis, human prisoners worked in the deep tunnels, digging for rare crystals. The Draxon guards thought they were just following orders, but the humans were actually mapping every tunnel, every weak point in the planet's defenses. They communicated through coded taps on the walls, a system the aliens could not understand. Jack was one of the mining team leaders. He had been a construction engineer on Earth, and now he used his skills to secretly build hidden chambers deep in the mines. In these chambers, other humans worked on crude but effective weapons made from mining tools and stolen Draxon parts. On the industrial world of Nixer, human slaves in the factories had learned to sabotage production lines without being detected. They made tiny flaws in Draxon weapons, weakened ship hulls by a few percentage points, and contaminated fuel supplies with chemicals that would cause failures. Months later, Maria had been a computer programmer on Earth. Now she worked in the Draxon data centers, pretending to be a simple maintenance worker. But she was actually planting logic bombs in their computer systems, programs that would activate when she sent the right signal. The Draxon overseers never suspected anything. To them, humans were just another primitive species, good for manual labor, but too stupid for complex thinking. They never imagined that their slaves were preparing for war. Back in Underground Facility 7, the first ghost ship launched on its maiden voyage. The AI pilot, designated Alpha 1, guided the craft through its first quantum phase jump. For 3 seconds, the ship existed between dimensions, completely invisible to all sensors. Phase jump successful, Alpha 1 reported in a calm electronic voice. All systems functioning normally. Ready for operational deployment. Colonel Brooks smiled for the first time in 2 years. Alpha 1, your mission is reconnaissance. Map Draxan fleet positions throughout the Outer Rim. Do not engage. We need information before we begin the real fight. Understood, Colonel? Beginning deep space patrol. The ghost ship vanished into hyperspace, its quantum drive leaving no trace. For Draxan sensors to detect. Dr. Roberts watched the ship disappear on his screens. How long until we're ready for a full assault? 6 more months, Brooks replied. We need to finish building the other ghost ships, complete the pilot training, and coordinate with our people on the slave worlds. The Empire thinks it destroyed humanity. They're about to learn that you can't kill an idea, and the idea of freedom burns brighter in darkness. As the months passed, more ghost ships launched from hidden facilities scattered across the asteroid belt. Each one carried a shadow pilot and an AI companion, mapping Draxan positions and identifying targets. The Empire's own size worked against them. They had grown too large to watch every corner of their territory. The stage was set for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen at first blood 6 months later. The war began not with massive battles, but with whispers and shadows. Admiral Kane was reviewing fleet reports in his command center on Primo when the first strange incidents started appearing in the data. 3 mining operations had suffered complete system failures within the same week. A patrol fleet in the Outer Rim had lost contact with headquarters. 2 supply convoys had simply vanished without sending distress signals. Probably mechanical failures, his aide suggested. The equipment is getting old on some of those outer worlds. Kane frowned at his screens. The Draxan Empire had ruled for 3,000 years because they never ignored patterns. Something was wrong, but he could not identify what. Light years away, Shadow pilot Alex guided his ghost ship through quantum phase, emerging silently behind a Draxan patrol cruiser. His AI companion, Beta 3, had spent weeks studying this particular ship's patrol route. Target identified. Beta 3 reported. Cruiser designation DX447. Crew of 200. Standard patrol pattern confirmed. Alex's enhanced reflexes allowed him to pilot the ghost ship with inhuman precision. The genetic modifications had changed more than just his physical abilities. His mind processed information faster, saw patterns that normal humans would miss. Beginning silent strike protocol, he whispered. The ghost ship fired a single quantum torpedo. The weapon phased through the cruiser's shields as if they did not exist, then materialized inside the ship's engine core. The explosion was contained. Within the hull, to outside observers, the cruiser simply lost power and drifted dead in space. No distress signal. No evidence of attack, just another mechanical failure. On the mining world Karis, Jack received the coded signal he had been waiting for. 3 taps on the tunnel wall, followed by 2, then 5. The rebellion had begun. Time to go, he whispered to the other humans in his work crew. They moved through the tunnels like ghosts, using passages they had secretly carved over 2 years of captivity. The Draxan guards never saw them coming. Mining tools became weapons, and human rage became a deadly force. The fusion reactor that powered the mining operation had a critical flaw, one that Jack had carefully created over months of routine maintenance. When he activated the hidden override, the reactor would overload in exactly 30 minutes. Enough time for the humans to escape, but not enough for the Draxen to fix it. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. On Nexer, Maria activated her logic bombs from a hidden terminal. Every computer system in the industrial complex began showing false data, opening airlocks, and shutting down life support in Draxen quarters. The aliens scrambled to regain control, but the viruses adapted faster than they could respond. On the fortress world of Grimm, human slaves in the weapons factories had spent months weakening structural supports. When they triggered the carefully placed explosives they had built from stolen materials, entire sections of the military base collapsed. Draxen soldiers found themselves trapped under tons of rubble, their communication systems jammed by improvised signal blockers. Emperor Vox was in his throne room when the reports started flooding in. 12 facilities destroyed or crippled in a single day. No clear enemy, no obvious pattern, no survivors to explain what had happened. "This is impossible," he snarled at Admiral Kane. Who would dare attack the Empire? Every species in the galaxy knows the price of rebellion. Kane studied the holographic map showing the affected worlds. They were scattered across different sectors, with no obvious strategic connection. But his military mind began to see the pattern. "My lord, these are all worlds with significant slave populations, and many of these facilities used prisoners from that primitive world we conquered 2 years ago." "The humans?" Vox laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the throne room. "Those weak creatures? They cannot even build proper starships." "Perhaps, my lord. But consider, every attack showed detailed knowledge of our systems, our weaknesses, our patrol schedules. This was not random terrorism. This was planned." As if to prove his point, another report arrived. The communication relay station net. Sigma Prime had gone dark. Then another, the fuel depot at New Centauri, had exploded. Then another, and another. The Ghost Fleet was in full operation now. 12 ships, each one invisible to Draxen sensors, each one guided by an AI that learned from every encounter. They struck like lightning, then vanished before anyone could respond. Back in Underground Facility 7, Colonel Brooks watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Red dots marked successful strikes across 100 light years of space. "Phase 1 complete," he announced to his staff. "The Empire knows they are under attack, but they still do not know who is attacking them or how. Phase 2 begins tomorrow." Dr. Roberts looked up from his workstation. "The Liberation fleets?" Brooks nodded. "Time to bring our people home. And then we show this Empire what happens when humans get angry." The fury unleashed the liberation of Kara's began at dawn, local time. But this dawn came from human ships, not the system's dying star. Shadow pilot Lisa emerged from quantum phase directly above the planet's main garrison. Her ghost ship was no longer alone. Behind her materialized a fleet of 30 vessels, each one built in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt. These were not the small ghost ships designed for stealth. These were Fury-class destroyers, bristling with weapons reverse-engineered from captured Draxen technology and improved by human innovation. "This is Liberation Fleet Alpha," Lisa broadcast, "on all frequencies. Any human who can hear this message, the cavalry has arrived." The Draxen garrison commander, General Kex, watched in disbelief as the human fleet appeared on his sensors. Where had these ships come from? Intelligence reports claimed humans had no spacefaring capability beyond primitive rockets. "All defense platforms open fire," he ordered. "Deploy the orbital defense grid." The Draxen weapons fired massive energy beams at the human fleet. But the human ships moved like they were alive, twisting and turning in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Their hulls were coated with adaptive armor that shifted and changed, dispersing energy attacks across their surfaces. Impossible, General Kex muttered. No species learns that fast. He was wrong. Humans did not just learn fast, they learned from everything. Every Draxan attack was analyzed by the ship's AI systems in microseconds. Every weapon pattern was studied, countered, and turned into an advantage. The human ships struck back with weapons the Draxan had never seen before. Plasma cannons that fired in spiraling patterns, making them almost impossible to intercept. Quantum missiles that phased through shields and rematerialized inside enemy hulls. Gravity bombs that created crushing force fields around Draxan vessels. But the most devastating weapon was not made of metal and energy. It was hope. Down in the mining tunnels, Jack heard the sound of human voices over the communication systems. After 2 years of silence, after 2 years of believing they were alone in the universe, the slaves of Karis heard their own language again. All human prisoners. This is Colonel Brooks of the Human Liberation Force. Take cover and prepare for immediate extraction. The war has begun, and we are winning. The effect was electric. Humans who had been broken by years of slavery suddenly remembered what they were fighting for. They rose up against their guards with renewed fury, using weapons they had hidden and tactics they had planned during the long months of captivity. The Draxan guards found themselves facing an enemy they did not understand. These humans moved with coordination that seemed impossible for slaves. They struck at weak points the aliens did not even know they had. Within hours, the entire planetary defense network was in human hands. Similar scenes unfolded across 12 worlds simultaneously. The Human Liberation Force had divided into multiple fleets, each one targeting a different slave world. They moved with precision that impressed even their AI companions. On Nexer, Maria stood in the control room she had sabotaged months earlier, now wearing the uniform of a Liberation Force technician. Around her, freed human slaves worked at control panels, turning the planet's industrial capacity toward a new purpose, building ships for the human fleet. Production Line 7 is online, she reported to Captain Webb, the Liberation Force commander. We can begin manufacturing Fury-class destroyers within the week. Captain Webb nodded approvingly. The Empire built their factories with slave labor. Now those same factories will build the tools of their destruction. The news reached Emperor Vox within hours, but the reports seemed like fiction. 12 major worlds had fallen to human forces in a single day. Entire Draxan fleets had been destroyed by an enemy that supposedly had no space technology. How many ships do they have? Vox demanded of Admiral Kane. Intelligence estimates at least 200 vessels, my lord. But the number is growing. Rapidly, they are using our own factories to build more ships, and their construction speed is unprecedented. Vox slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. 2 years ago, these humans were primitives who had barely reached their own moon. Now you tell me they have a fleet that can challenge the Empire? My lord, I believe we have made a fundamental error in our assessment of this species. Humans do not just adapt to new technology, they improve it. Every ship they capture, every weapon system they study, they make it better than the original. For the first time in 3,000 years, Emperor Vox felt something he had forgotten existed: fear. Mobilize the Grand Fleet, he ordered. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon in the Empire. We will crush this rebellion before it spreads further. But unknown to the Emperor, it was already too late. In hidden shipyards across the galaxy, humans were building vessels that would make their current fleet look like toys. The real war was about to begin. The Empire's end, the Battle of Prima, began with silence. Emperor Vox stood in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the greatest fleet ever assembled. 10,000 Draxan warships, formed a defensive wall around the capital world. Every vessel in the Empire had been called home. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers filled with fighter craft, and the massive flagship Eternal Dominion. That housed the Emperor himself. "Let them come," Vox declared to his admirals. "When the humans see the true might of the Empire, they will remember their place." Admiral Kane was not so confident. His scouts had brought disturbing reports from the Outer Rim. Human ships that moved faster than physics should allow. Weapons that ignored shields completely. Entire Draxan fleets found drifting in space, their crews simply gone. "My lord," Kane said carefully, "perhaps we should consider negotiation. The humans have proven they are not the primitives we believe them to be." Vox's eyes blazed with fury. "The Empire does not negotiate with slaves. We will crush this rebellion, and then we will hunt down every human in the galaxy. They will learn that defying us means extinction." At that moment, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace. But it was not a fleet. It was a single ship. The vessel was massive, larger even than the Eternal Dominion, but its design was unlike anything in the galaxy. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and energy patterns danced across its surface in hypnotic waves. This was the Retribution, humanity's ultimate weapon, built from the combined knowledge of every species the Empire had enslaved. Asterisk Colonel Brooks stood on the bridge of the Retribution, now promoted to Admiral of the Human Liberation Force. Around him, the greatest human minds worked at stations that blended technology from a dozen different civilizations. Dr. Roberts monitored quantum field generators. Maria controlled information, warfare systems. Jack managed the ship's adaptive defenses. One ship? Emperor Vox laughed when he saw the display. They send one ship against 10,000? The humans have finally shown their true stupidity. "All fleets, open fire," he commanded. "Destroy that vessel and end this war." 10,000 Draxan warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. The space around the Retribution filled with energy beams, plasma bolts, and quantum torpedoes. It was enough firepower to destroy a star. The human ship did not dodge. Instead, it absorbed every attack. The Retribution's hull rippled as the enemy weapon struck, but instead of taking damage, the ship grew brighter. Energy collection arrays across its surface drank in the assault, feeding the power into systems that no single species could have invented. "Thank you." Admiral Brooks broadcast on all frequencies. "You have just charged our weapons." The Retribution fired once. A wave of pure energy erupted from the ship, but it was not a destructive beam. It was something far more devastating, a consciousness disruptor that targeted the neural patterns of aggressive species. Every Draxan in the enemy fleet suddenly found their minds flooded with the memories and emotions of every being they had enslaved. For the first time in their lives, the Draxan felt what their victims had experienced. They felt the terror of families torn apart. They experienced the despair of worlds stripped bare. They understood the pain of children taken from their parents and sold into slavery. The effect was instant and total. Across the entire fleet, Draxan soldiers collapsed. At their stations, overwhelmed by guilt and horror. Those who did not lose consciousness immediately began shutting down their own weapons, unable to continue fighting while experiencing the suffering they had caused. Emperor Vox staggered on his throne as the wave hit the Eternal Dominion. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of 3,000 years of cruelty. He saw the faces of every innocent being his empire had destroyed, heard the cries of every child orphaned by his wars. "No," he whispered, falling to his knees. "What have we done? What have we become?" Admiral Brooks opened a communication channel to the Draxan flagship. "Emperor Vox, this is Admiral Brooks of the Human Liberation Force. Your empire is finished." Not because we destroyed it with weapons, but because you finally understand what you truly were. The retribution moved through the paralyzed fleet, like a shepherd among sheep. Wherever it went, human teams beamed aboard the Draxan ships, not as conquerors, but as liberators. They freed the remaining slaves, secured the weapons, and began the long process of dismantling an empire built on suffering. On Prima, the slave market stood empty for the first time in millennia. The purple banners of the empire were torn down and replaced with simple white flags of surrender. The Draxan, broken by their newfound understanding of their crimes, offered no resistance. The war was over, but humanity's real work was just beginning. They had not fought for conquest or revenge, but for something the galaxy had almost forgotten: justice. Now they would help rebuild the worlds the Empire had destroyed, reunite families that had been torn apart, and ensure that no species would ever again rule through fear and cruelty. The age of human retribution was complete. The age of human compassion had begun. Asterisk.